Clashes which started at 11 in the morning have crippled business in Mandera town, which is approximately 3 kilometers from the said battleground. Our Jeff Kirui reports on the clash that happened just hours after 11 Kenyan members of parliament traveled to Somalia to meet the president, Mohamed Farmajo, whose administration wants Kenya to hand over a fugitive from Jubaland seeking political asylum in the country. In Kenya, that is.
The number of those injured in the fighting had reached 12 as of Monday afternoon. Unconfirmed reports say the number could be more than 20 now, both civilian and others in military outfit.
6 of them are civilians, 4 are men in uniform, we don't know their identities. Out of the 6 civilians who are injured, all of them reported that they were caught in the crossfire.
The fighting started late morning on Monday, just hours after 11 members of parliament from northeastern landed from their trip to Somalia to meet President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. A fierce clash has broken out between Somali troops and Jubaland forces in Bulahawa, 3 kilometers away from Mandera town. The MPs who alleged were on a private visit to Somalia and met President Farmajo in what they termed as interest of regional peace and stability have been against the Kenyan government move to host fugitives from Jubaland, among them Jubaland Security Minister Abdul Rashid Janan Hassan Abdinur.
We don't want to be involved in a war between the national government of Somalia and federal government of Somalia and Jubaland. I think there is some bad blood between themselves, and I think we have been hosting fugitives. And we want to demand from our country, our country, Kenya, to safeguard the interests of the people and the safety of the people of Kenya. And this is cannot be acceptable.
Kenya has been working closely with Jubaland President Ahmed Madobe in combating the Al-Shabaab terrorist group in Juba and Gedo regions, a move that has further severed the forced relationship between Kenya and Somalia over border disputes. Claims are emerging that the MP's visit was meant to persuade Kenya to stop harboring the fugitives in a bid to quell tension that has been growing, and the fact that they did not see clearance raising concerns.
MPs don't require permission from the Speaker to travel on private matters. In fact, according to the Constitution, you only tell the Speaker when you are not going to be in Parliament during parliamentary day. We don't also get permission from what they call it, from Foreign Affairs. We don't work with them. I think Kenyan Constitution guarantees freedom of movement of speech. I think what we have been talking about in terms of the danger we are facing, and whatever maybe our colleagues talked about it yesterday, is today coming. Actually, we have been vindicated today by what's happening in Mandera today.
The conflict between what they call the Somali National Army and Jubaland administration, if they fight inside what they call the Gedo region, definitely it will affect security-wise and economic-wise to northern Kenya. That's why the MPs, they were discussing the issue with President Farmajo himself, so that they can ease the tension. Because Jubaland is a part of Somalia. That's what they call internal affairs of Somalia. So if, if they have their own problems, we don't want to spill over that problem into other side of the border.
In a press statement, police spokesperson Charles Owino confirmed that the gunfight took place in Bulahawa in Somalia, a town approximately 3 kilometers from Mandera town. The heavy gunfire has forced Mandera residents to flee the town and businesses closed down.
Half of Mandera town has now been deserted, and we already have internally displaced people within Mandera, parts of Mandera.
And we are worried that this is actually going to really affect us. We have demanded that our government takes care of our people. Our government relocates the people who are illegally in our border, armed soldiers, which are numbering 100 plus, who have been camping there. And we have asked these people to be relocated so that they can do their fighting elsewhere.
Tension has been growing near the Kenya-Somalia border in Mandera following reports that Somalia troops have been gathering in a plan to capture Jubaland fugitive minister who escaped from Mogadishu prison in January and has been seeking refuge in Kenyan soil. And a clash was imminent as Jubaland security stood ground that they are ready to defend their territories. And on Monday, Jubaland forces guarding the fugitive engaged in an exchange of fire with the Somalia forces along the Kenya-Somalia border, with reports indicating that Jubaland forces were received and hosted in Mandera Town Police Station, with the Kenya Defense Forces guarding the facility. Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
So that has been happening for the last 5 days. Somali National Army crossing border into Kenya to look for Abdi Rashad Janan, a clash between Somalian forces and the Jubaland forces. Has Somalia crossed the line here, and where is the government in this?
Well, you know, when you look at our diplomacy, for the longest time, when President Moi was in charge, he said he's not going to have friends nor enemies in the region. So Kenya was a bastion of international diplomatic relations. The Uganda peace talks took place here, even the Somali peace talks and South Sudan. But I think with the advent of the Jubilee administration, they flipped our mode of diplomacy. But when you go back to the Berlin conference, which created these artificial walls, when you look at our border with Tanzania, you have Kenyan Maasais and the Tanzanian Maasais. When they're looking for pasture, they don't even realize that there's a border. In Western Kenya, where Chesa comes from, there are some Luyas who stay in Kenya, you know, others in Busia, even the origin of border. So as a nation, we should strive that at all times we have peace with our neighbors. Even for these MPs who went to Somalia, I do not understand why parts of government were up in ups asking them, what were you doing in Somalia? Because you live just across the border. You will even be in Somalia and you don't know that you're in Somalia. If you're in Busia, you'll be in Uganda, you don't know that you're in Uganda. If you're in Namanga, as a Maasai man with your cows, you'll actually be in Tanzania and you don't know whether or not you are in Tanzania. But what you should strive to do is to ensure that we do
follow protocol. That's what we understand.
But technically speaking, for MPs, unless they are going as a parliamentary delegation, I mean, they just need to notify the speakers that we are moving somewhere. It doesn't need to be very formal. But at the end of the day, we should ask ourselves that Kenya's support for Jubaland, does it serve our regional security interest? Because the only reason why you are supporting Jubaland is to create a buffer zone so that the Al-Shabaab doesn't come in. But from the time Kenya went to Somalia, is there evidence that the terrorist attacks have reduced because we are in Somalia? Those are the hard questions we need to ask ourselves. It's very easy to put on the patriotism hats and start boiling over with fury. But when you go to the crux of the matter, everything we do, does it enhance our friendship? Like, for instance, the Ethiopian administration wants a very strong government in Somalia, so that Kenya's support for Jubaland creates bad blood. So do we want to have bad blood with Ethiopia? And then do we want to have bad blood with Somali? Do we want to have bad blood with our neighbors in Tanzania? So in my view, when you are coming up with our foreign policy, we need to do what we keep on saying times above number, sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis. Having said that, yes, we can now not allow people from Somalia, if they're engaging in their catfights, we cannot give them space in Kenya. If I were the president, the moment those guys crossed the line and came to Kenya, they should have been given a very serious beating so that they respect Kenya as a sovereign nation. We can't allow our neighbors, they could be our cousins, they could be our brothers and our sisters, but we cannot allow them to violate our space. Because you see now they're playing 3 kilometers into our border. If we don't flex our muscles, the next thing you'll find them in Isili, Nairobi, exchanging gunfire.
Ken, what do you think about the SNA forces fighting Jubaland forces inside Kenyan territory with casualties, Kenyan casualties at that?
I think this joke is being taken too far by government, and we are sitting on a time bomb. Sitting on a time bomb because Somalia is not any ordinary neighbor like Uganda, like Tanzania, with whom we've witnessed peaceful border and cross-border relations. We know what is going on in Somalia. We have our soldiers in Somalia, the Linda Inchi program. The border is porous. We know that the source of Al-Shabaab is partly because of the insecurity in Somalia and the porous border, and there being no clear regulations on the cross-border interactions between the Kenyan side and the Somali side. Why am I saying we are sitting on a time bomb? Because if we do not solve this issue in time and use the best approach, it is going to go out of control. And if it goes out of control, ultimately, these two states will be losers, and Kenya will suffer more. The two heads of state should come together. They should come together to reach an amicable solution and avoid these sideshows of forces fighting against each other on the Kenyan soil. Already, that is a violation under international law, a violation of cross-border relations. And this is not an ordinary problem. Remember, we have a case with Somalia at the ICJ. So the state should address this issue knowing its genesis. Let us have a discourse on the ICJ case.
All right.
Then let us have a discourse over the border relations. Thank you.
Mark, where does this leave Kenya? Because on one hand, security experts say that we have to be in cordial relations with Jubaland because of that buffer zone that Dismas is talking about if we want to prevent Al-Shabaab from getting into the country. At the same time, Ken here points out that case we have with Somalia and the ICJ. So where does that leave us? We can't choose, but our territorial integrity is being violated by these two states.
In my opinion, we've done a lot of pussyfooting around this issue for way too long. Let's start here. Number one, the 11 MPs need to tell us whether they're MPs of Kenya or MPs of Somalia. Let's just be very clear. This idea that a lot of leaders from the north can write on Twitter as though they belong to Somalia more than Kenya needs to stop. Because at the end of the day, they are Kenyan Maasais, yes, but they act like Kenyan Maasai. They do not act like Tanzanian Maasais. And this is critical because, as far as I'm concerned, we are about to lose our territorial integrity and we are playing games with it. Let's be clear. The maritime border dispute is not a $2 affair. It is a $1 trillion affair. Okay? Kenya is about to lose a lot of money if we do not act right. The fact that we've allowed Somali forces to come 3 kilometers into Kenya should remind us of the shifter wars. And let's not forget the mentality of a lot of the people who are in leadership in Somalia, Farmajo included, has not changed. If you go to Somali Twitter today, and I dare you to go, you will see where they've drawn them up. They've drawn them up hiving out parts of Kenya as part of Somalia. And now you cannot face such people with kid gloves. We cannot react to that as though it is just a simple slap on the face. It cannot be. And that's why I agree with Dismas. Why these Somalis have not been taken back with their tails between their legs as it should be is beyond reason for me. They do not have international backing to get into Kenya. They do not have a reason to get into Kenya. And if it's a fugitive they're looking for, there are diplomatic channels to do so. But this allowance of that leaders from the north are somehow allowed to fraternize with people like Farmajo, who has clearly indicated that he is an enemy of Kenya, is wrong. Secondly, those MPs should tell us, what did they gain from going there? Did they receive money from a foreign government? And what does that mean to us? Because if it was Moi time, that would be treason. And I want to remind Kenyans, there was a time a single piece of military equipment was taken from Kenya. Moi did not come with these funny statements you are giving now. He told them, I've given you X number of days, bring those things or else you'll see. Because the only way to handle Somalia, and if we remember the shifter wars and the ideology that Farmajo has right now, we have to play tough. And that is why our support for Madube and the Jubaland regime has to be unequivocal. Because if Madube is on the wrong side of Farmajo, then he's on the right side of us. That's how diplomacy is done. Right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's be clear. Also, Jubaland sits on the place where the border is disputed. If I was president, I would have gone much further and actually claimed that Jubaland as part of Kenya, so that now we fight over Jubaland while they fight over the sea. That is the kind of hardball diplomacy we need to play. This thing of writing letters to them and asking them nicely to stop doing bad things shall only create a ticking time bomb, as has been said before.
Kipchumba, why do you think there is that pussyfooting, like Mark puts it, around this issue between Nairobi and Mogadishu, whereas we know that Kenya stands to lose in both scenarios?
Ben, before we answer your question, the first question we need to begin from the basics 101. What is our foreign policy as a country? That is where we begin. Two, the other thing is, will you allow or will you be allowed to go fighting with your sister in your father's bedroom at night? It won't be allowed. Whatever Somali is doing is fighting in their father's bedroom at 2 p.m., which is not allowed, not in Africa, not in Europe. What we are saying is this. Uhuru Kenyatta took the proverbial sword to protect the territorial integrity of this country. Somali is a country Kenya has brought up for all purposes and intents. We cannot allow somebody, a kid we have adopted, to overgrow the parents who adopted him and to start asking the father of the house questions. Two, from the Kenyan government, I don't think it is the right thing to engage in that Madobe-Farmajo fights. There is another thing that also Farmajo has been pulling the Kenyan government and the Kenyan as a nation to. He has been pulling us to use us as a campaign stepping stone, which I think Nairobi should serve Farmajo a notice, and it should not be served through Kanzedena. It should be served through Mwadede, the Chief Defense Forces. Because we have that defense force, not so that they can march when a head of state dies, no, so that people in Mandera are secure. What business do we have having Linda Nchi if these people have come all the way, breached our security, territorial security, breached our territorial integrity, and all the way to Mandera, fight within our land, and they do not have the courtesy to apologize? Two, for all intents and purposes, I know the Somalis watching this show might not be happy with me, but Somali as a nation has been an aggressor to Kenya. You cannot go to an international court when you are receiving help from us, yes, and go and say that we are taking your waters and something, instead of solving the issue at a local level. So what we need to do with Somalia, and away from this thing of we have no enemies and no friends, we need to stand firm and tell Somalia it is either our way or the highway.
Okay. Ken, there's a school of thought that Farmajo is trying to start a war with Kenya for his political reasons.
His re-election actually is coming up in a few months.
It's totally re-election, yes.
Is that plausible? And is it in Kenya's interest to not engage Somalia?
One, I buy that theory, because what he is doing is an act of provocation. And states, under international law, are allowed to act in their best interest and in securing their territorial integrity when neighboring states or any other state do acts which amount to provocation. It is in Farmajo's interest that he begins a war with Kenya and get some rhetoric thrown around as he does his re-election. It is not in Kenyan interest to begin war with anyone, leave alone Somalia. But where it has taken us to, we may be left with no option but the head of state declaring Somalia as an enemy, the acts by Farmajo as provocative acts, and seeking the consent of the international community to launch a defense.
Finally, Dismas, from the perspective of Mandera residents who are not feeling secure, led by their governor, Ali Roba, who says that the situation is worsening, what is the national government, what are the steps it's supposed to do right now, to secure the people of Mandera?
Now let's go to the Middle East, and there's a small nation called Israel. All our neighbors know that if you try any mischief on Israel, they're going to respond to fire using double fire. Now the people in Mandera, the residents in Mandera, they don't care about the political dynamics within Somali. They are Kenyans. They could be having their brothers or sisters or cousins across the road. But they expect that President Uhuru Kenyatta is going to defend them. So whatever it takes for President Kenyatta to reassure them of their security, he must do it as the first port of call. Then now we can address the diplomatic issues later. Because you cannot have Kenyans in Mandera. They could even be Morai in Mandera wondering what is going on. When you're a Kenyan, whether or not you pay tax, whether or not you voted for Jubilee, you must feel safe in that space. And anybody who pokes our eyes, they must suffer. We must spray some pilipili into their eyes, and then they'll know that if you joke with Kenya, Nairobi is going to give you a beating.
And Ben, let's be clear. For the Somali soldiers within 3 kilometers or into the Kenyan border, we do not need anyone's permission to kick them out. We do not need any international support to kick them out. And let's also be clear, Kenya's military, we spend a lot of money in it. So to answer the question, if they brought 6 soldiers, we need to send 60 tanks. That's the proper response.
But again, Ben, the question is, as a nation called Kenya, I mean, is it possible that you can have all these troops, understand, called ragtag militia, all of them coming to our space, and we are seated in Nairobi
It's a million-shilling question, isn't it?
But
what
then,
is happening?
The other thing, we allowed Migingo to happen. Up to now, we don't know where Migingo is. We will just see Mandera going, and we will just be sitting here.
What is happening in Mandera security situation? Questions being asked on Nairobi, what it is doing to secure the people of Mandera. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics on KTN News. When we come back, we'll be having your call, giving you a chance to call in studio with your views and comments over what we're discussing today. Ruto fighting back, making all these claims and what is happening, saying there is a plan to stop him at all costs. We've also talked about the DCI and DPP disconnects. The two of them, have downplayed those issues, and also talked about Mandera situation where Somali National Army forces and the Jubaland forces have been fighting inside Kenyan territory. What is your take on all this? Tell us when we come back.